Hello, viewers. Welcome to an episode from the Canada Files. Now, there is basically some real controversy that went down during a recent nomination process for the NDP candidate for Toronto Centre. Now, I am speaking to Sebastian Mendoza-Price. So, Sebastian, we all know, on August 17th, Bill Morneau resigned as the finance minister, prompting an eventual by-election with an unannounced date. So, what did you do after this was revealed?
So I live in Toronto Centre. I actually live and organize in the area. So, I have pretty deep roots in the community, and I have seen the ways in which the NDP wasn't engaging with it properly, and thought that this would be an opportunity to rectify that and ideally win in the context of a low turnout by-election. But I mean, a win doesn't mean much to me if they just win with a standard issue centrist, right? Because then why not just have the Liberals? So I had some interest in running, but that wasn't a fully formed out thought yet. But at the very least, I did have interest in bringing new people into the coalition, and creating a campaign that the NDP could be proud of, that would turn non-voters from working class districts into voters, ardent NDP supporters, and community advocates. So I reached out the week Bill Morneau resigned, actually, and I reached out and I said, we gotta have a conversation about starting a nomination process up immediately and kind of getting boots on the ground, because I suspect that there will be a nomination, not a nomination, sorry, an election. The by-election will be called sometime between November and December. And I got this flippant response of you don't understand how Ottawa works because you're not here. The by-election is obviously not going to happen until February. And I said, well, that don't make no sense, because February is supposed to be some of the worst time for the second wave, which that was kind of when COVID started in February of 2020. So then to kind of gamble with the by-election, especially in our riding, which was hit super hard by COVID, especially in St. Jamestown, it didn't make sense to me. So I said, okay, well, if you say so. And for that month, I hadn't heard anything. I mean, I know that the NDP had put out ads saying they were looking for volunteers, they were making themselves election ready, et cetera, but I hadn't heard anything from the NDP with regards to a nomination meeting starting to shape up, or any way to actually apply to or to put your name forward to be the candidate or to contest in the nomination. So that whole month until basically that whole month until the day that Marcy Ian was announced and the by-election was called, that whole month I didn't hear nothing from the NDP.
Okay, so now the by-election and the Liberal candidate were officially announced on September 18th now. What were some of the next steps you took?
It's funny, I actually found that out while I was doing some frontline work. So I reached out to the NDP and I said, well, you know what, I'll put my name forward, because originally I was looking to support an activist candidate who had the activist experience or the similar experience that I had, kind of had the same politics as me, and be able to support them, because I'm not somebody who I'm not a super front and center person. I don't like to be out. I can be quite introverted at times, so I thought if that would be a lot to be on an election campaign, and the NDP and my gender identity is going to be weaponized against me. So originally I wasn't even intending to run, but it kind of all came together at the like 11th hour. I say, you know what, I put my name forward. I'll put my name forward and I'll do it because I think that I have the ability to run the kind of activist campaign that I want to see given my experience. Mm. So that had that transpired and that took place. And I got so I called somebody on the EDA and they said that they would get back to me, that they would put me in touch with the riding president, and didn't hear back that day. That was around like 3 or 4 p.m. that I hit up said person. Didn't hear from the riding president, didn't hear from anybody. It wasn't until the next day actually that I got this kind of call from the riding president that was like, Central's taken over this whole process. It's out of my hands. Best of luck. They'll probably just appoint somebody. And I said, okay, all right. So it it was just so weird. Like I didn't understand why it was so difficult to get information, and somebody else who was on the EDA who wasn't the writing president but was another member of the EDA who I think was chairing up the candidate search committee. She was like, yeah, we're like in the process of like getting things together. Everything's a bit in flux right now. So we'll let you know. So it was like a slightly different answer, but it was also kind of the same non-answer that the writing president gave me. But both of them did say one thing very clearly, which that one of the challenges was that the vetting packages were not the same one, like were in the process of being changed. So without a vetting package, they can't vet people, which means like, which is why they're having a very difficult time. So I thought, well, in a normal circumstance, I would say, well, why not use your vetting package from 2019? But I think as everyone who's involved with the NDP or who was involved with the NDP knows, 2019 was an absolute disaster in terms of that vetting package. So I said, okay, I get it, you know? Um, so I was waiting, but I spoke to a friend of mine who was on federal council, and she said the vetting package already got approved. It had actually gotten approved that Tuesday, so it was ready to go, and that I should have just gotten the vetting package. And I said, well, you know, they're not even telling me, like, they're not even telling me if I can apply. Like, I'm just getting these emails or these phone calls, very non-committal, saying, well, we might not because we don't have the vetting package. And I said, so I'm actually not sure what the process is at this moment. And the person who is on federal council who actually approved this vetting package for this year was like, no, it got approved. So like this is something that you should put up a fight for because it's fundamentally unfair, she said, how my treatment was. So I said, okay, so I'll go get to that. I will you know, challenge that a little bit. And the way that I did it was by putting together a petition and getting signatures from members of the community. And it was basically calling to recognize my candidacy, to have an open and fair nomination, and to have a nomination that lets the working class voters in my district in to the political process. And in 3 days, we got about 177 signatures. It was just me and another volunteer. We'd go out for like 2 hours, 3 hours to the parts of the district and nobody wants to visit. And we would just collect signatures, da 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 da. We tried to get as many folks with addresses as possible, but also like a lot of even houseless folks signed this petition, you know, and wanted to figure out how to get involved in the political process, which by the way, the NDP does not have a format to actually let houseless folks sign up to be members of the NDP. Their method is basically if you are a houseless member of the NDP, you have to bring a guarantor with you to a nomination meeting to actually vouch that you sleep on the streets in this riding, which is just like beyond anything comprehensible to me. So I got this petition together, and I was about to present it, but right before I presented it, I called Anne McGrath, and she had said she'll have somebody get back to me. That was on Tuesday. I still hadn't heard anything as of Tuesday. This was like what, Tuesday, September 20 something, like. And Tuesday night, I finally got a call while I'm out collecting signatures. I get a call from somebody over at the NDP, a regional organizer, who was like, yeah, we're in the process of doing it right now. You're gonna get your request acknowledged, but I'm gonna interview you first. And I said, okay, interview. Maybe I'm the only candidate, right? I don't know why I would be interviewed. It's something for the voters to decide. But she was like, well, what's your strategy? What are your ideas? Like, what are your positions? Da da da. She said, oh, you seem to put a lot of effort into this, but we're gonna lose, right?
Huh? She actually said,
And I
wait,
was
wow.
like, she's like, you're putting a lot of time and investment for a writing that we're gonna lose. And I said, it's like, it's so out of touch, because it's like I live here. Like I know I would not have put my name forward. Well, I would have put my name forward even if it looked tight, which it did. I mean, like Marcy Ian, like I know her personally, and that she's actually a pretty good candidate for the Liberals to have. And it was always going to be a long shot, but I think that our candidacy was the only one that was positioned to bring working class people of color, especially, into the coalition by going to the parts of the riding that have low voter turnout, both in the general and in by-elections, and converting those non-voters into voters. And it was just kind of like, it was just such a vote of no confidence, right? Of like, this idea that you have to like reach out to working class people is like a fucking dud, and you should probably just like take a nap and like go back to private life because you seem to have these really far-fetched ideas. And that kind of bugged me, but I know that's how the NDP thinks already, because that's how like political parties or political operatives and apparatchiks think about working people like us. Like they already have contempt for us, so I wasn't necessarily surprised, but like I'm always still a little bit disappointed, right? So that was it. The next day was when I got my nomination papers, and it's a 50-page like vetting workbook, where they ask you like everything about you, and they only gave me 24 hours to complete it if I wanted or else I would be disqualified. So I had to rush home when I got it at 2 p.m. on Wednesday and finish it up.
Okay. Well, so now let's talk about you had some talks basically with the eventual nominee in this race, Brian Chang. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, Brian is good people. Like I wish him the best, because I think that he could have done things dirty, and he didn't, even though it benefited him to do so, right? Like he never needed to take a call with me, never needed to do look out for me when I was having trouble, even like hearing back from the organizers and from the EDA, but he actually did that. So I commend him for that, because I'm not like even for myself, like my vote with the NDP is never guaranteed. That's why I always say it's never guaranteed. They have to work for it. So I think that Brian definitely deserves the vote in Toronto Centre, because he showed that he, at least, even if we have different politics, or even if we have different opinions on how to run a winning campaign, he has integrity, and I respect that, because like where I'm from, like all you have is your word, right? So and he didn't really renege on it, but he did send out some emails and stuff like that, but I felt that it became quite clear that he was going to be the candidate that would run kind of the same standard issue campaign. And the NDP really favored that. Like, I definitely felt like he just had more ease of communication with I was able to have. And I just found that a bit frustrating at times, right? Because it's like, for better or for worse, like, he lost. So in that context, like, you need to think about what what are the reasons why he lost, and what are the new strategies that you can impart. And sometimes that might also be like new blood, right? And I was kind of trying to offer that. But and I didn't have any problem like being in a contested nomination with him, you know, like, I actually wanted a contested nomination because I wanted democracy to live. But you know, this isn't like Athens where only like property owning men are allowed to vote. Like, you need to run something that brings people from all over the district and brings them into the coalition, so that the NDP has a team of people from various backgrounds, like, ready to go on day one when the candidate is chosen. But you couldn't not notice the fact that Brian, who had already done this before, and whose partner is a very prominent member of the EDA, and also like has worked for Olivia Chow, and Brian himself worked for Jagmeet Singh for many years, right? So in that context, like, when you're going, oh, well, this is probably going to be like a closed off race for members, or Central is going to appoint someone, or everything was in flux. Like, we knew that it was either going to be a members only nomination, or Central was going to appoint someone. Well, either of those choices benefit the person who's already from the inside. And Brian, even though he's good people's, is not necessarily an outsider. And I felt that, you know, for better or for worse, he would be chosen as the person, which would have been fine if he worked hard to sign up new members and actually, like, you know, participated in the democratic process. But he didn't, right? He wouldn't have in this context, right? It would have been at the expense of people like me who are trying to run.
Yeah, so let's get back in terms of the nomination process. Now, you eventually managed to get in touch with some figures within the EDA and the NDP. However, there are some issues that you were required to take down social media for a period of time. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so really after I got in touch with Anne McGrath and then put in touch with the regional organizer, there was no interaction with the EDA after that. So I just want to make that clear, like, Central, and from what I understand when I talked to a friendly member of the EDA, like the one person I like over there, they had said that this thing was just completely taken over by Central. So it wasn't like, I don't know how much of a stake they had in the game, but I always find these arguments a bit fickle because, like, the NDP breaks the rules all the time, so y'all go break the fucking rules. Like, what's stopping you from just being like, I'm gonna do what I want? We want to have like a contested nomination that lets the working class in. If you were committed to that, then just do it. And then if the NDP's like, no, but be like, we're the writing association, we live here. Like, this regional organizer lives in Sudbury. Like, what's she going to drive down? So it's kind of like, whatever, like, do what you want, have the nomination that you want, choose people your own way. Like, Central doesn't have to upend you because Central, like, doesn't exist. It doesn't have any power unless you give it power, right? Like, it's a paper tiger that relies primarily on volunteer labor from people who live in ridings. So this kind of idea of like, well, we couldn't do anything about it and we just hated it too, is like always an argument that I hate, and too many people make it for too many reasons. But so anyways, to go back to the story, I had a conversation with Central, and I think that was like Wednesday. Wednesday is when I received the nomination package. Thursday is when I completed it and sent it at 4:55, 5 minutes before the deadline. And then I started getting added by, they have like Facebook profile that checks vetting. It's called Fred Checkers, and he adds me and da 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 da. And they called me. It must have been like Monday. Like I might get the dates wrong, but it was kind of like there was a couple days buffer in between, and now we were really getting down to the wire. And they had said that I got to take down my social media, and I said, okay, why? And they said, well, it's a lot. And I said, okay, have you checked it? Like, what specifically? And they're like, well, we haven't checked it, but like, it's just a lot. And I told them, I'm like, this has a lot of implications into it that I don't know if you're trying to make, but when I reached out, like when I heard that, I reached out to Caleb and I reached out to Brian, who were the other two candidates who were running in the race. There was a third person too who did not delete their social media. His name is Waleed Kogali. Also has like a very storied, like Caleb doesn't use Twitter or whatever. He has like an Instagram with no followers. Like he's not a guy on social media. So it didn't necessarily surprise me that his would be taken down. Brian Chang, I mean, he was vetted and had to take down what he had to take down in 2019, but obviously it's been a year since then. So I'm like sure that he must have posted something since then, including actually posting a picture of me at a rally speaking. So it's like, okay, there's like acknowledgement that like I'm a real person there. Anyways, and so he did that. So those two inspire me, but like Waleed has never ran for the NDP before, and he also has a very, very long and storied history on social media because he's been doing this politic shit for a little while. Like he ran for city council here in Toronto Centre in 2018. So you could probably find something if you actually wanted to. And but neither of those three were told to take down their social media. I was the only one who was told to take down my social media. Granted, I have been on social media since I was 10 years old. So I've been on social media for a long time. And yes, there's like shit that you post when you're a kid that probably sounds really dumb when you're an adult. However, my privacy settings are very restrictive on my social media, especially my Facebook and my Instagram. I used to work in like my job. I was in public relations and I worked with a lot of celebrities. So my social media was always very carefully monitored in terms of the public posts that I made, because at any time, if I'm seen in a YouTube video with a celebrity or something like that, I might get like tens of thousands of people who would be watching my profile. So I didn't just post up anything on my IG either. And kind of similar for Twitter too. So I was just like, just tell me what to delete. Like, tell me what the problem is. And they're like, oh, well, we haven't really checked it. It's just inherently problematic. And I said, well, this kind of does come across as like a bit transphobic because I've been on social media since like before I started like transitioning. So if you're telling the only non-cis candidate that they have to take down their social media because there's that inherent belief that it's problematic, then even if you don't have that intention of transphobia, at least fucking address it or defend yourself when I actually call that out. But then to weaponize the fact that like I literally could not participate in the nomination rather than address what you were saying and what you were doing through your actions, just being like, well, this is how it is, and if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. It was kind of like it put me between a rock and a hard place, because if I delete my social media, I know a lot of queer people from all over the world, including countries where they can sometimes actually be killed for their sexuality. And I have gotten those kinds of messages before of like something bad has happened to them. They need some help or something like that. They need money sent to them, wired to them, to their country or whatever. But even locally, I work with a lot of like queer Indigenous youth, and queer Indigenous youth is like has some of the highest rates of homelessness in Canada. So for houseless folks, they don't always have a stable phone plan, right? So like Facebook Messenger, if they can get a Wi-Fi signal, is usually their best way to communicate, or Instagram DMs, and also being disconnected from that. Like literally the night I had to disconnect my media, or actually I disconnected the morning after, but the night before I was on the phone with like, I was dealing with something on Facebook Messenger of like a kid who is or was houseless, and has just recently been housed, who has been dealing with some like mental health issues and had gotten himself into some serious trouble, right? So I had to make decisions that not only affected me when I deactivated my social media, but actually put other lives at risk. And I told this to the NDP, and there was just no inkling of sympathy, no inkling of like willingness to work. And I think this is going to be a losing it already is, but I think it's a losing strategy of the NDP to carefully vet everyone down to the last tweet based on this idea that everyone on the left or anyone interested in the NDP is inherently suspicious for their leftist views or for their identity, etc., and thus not not electable. And it's like, do you know some of the shit that liberals and conservatives have done and said? They're electable, they win. So why does the NDP have to play this role of like gatekeeping people from the political process, or from traditionally disenfranchised groups, through these kinds of tactics, right? And having them make these kinds of like life-altering decisions, which are specifically life-altering because like just like random straight white dude deletes Instagram for a few days, like whatever, right? But like in my case, it's like life or death for some of the queer youth in my community. So I had to make this decision. In the end, I complied with it, mostly to cool their bluff, but I did have a lot of anxiety about that throughout the entire nomination race. I also felt that it really hurt my candidacy because I couldn't actually reach out to my networks, right? You can't reach out to the journalists that I know who follow me. You can't reach out to no volunteers who I have on Facebook, who I know through the community. We can't, reach out to members who I met over the years who live in the area. So it's like, how am I supposed to like reach out to folks? How am I supposed to connect with my people when the three other candidates are able to connect with all of their people?
Yeah, well, that's just quite something. Okay, so now you managed to get through eventually, however, into the actual voting process and the contested nomination. Now this is where some more NDP specials come along. Can you talk a little bit more about what was rather unique about this process?
Yeah, I mean, to start, like, I had gotten approved sometime in the evening, and there's these appendix forms which you have to fill out and send to Elections Canada, and I filled them out, except for one which I had filled out minus one signature on it, which I had forgotten to put it in. So I had no problem like signing that. Like that's not a big deal. Takes me like 5 minutes. But in St. Jamestown, we do have a pretty poorly ran, or poorly maintained rather, electrical grid. So at least once, twice, maybe even three times a year, the power will go out in either certain buildings in the neighborhood or the whole neighborhood, for a couple of hours, or sometimes even up to a day, or sometimes even multiple days actually. The power and water will go out. So that happened to be this day. So I said that no worries, I'll sign it on my phone, I send it back. And I said, oh, well, this is an electronic signature. We can't take this, so you're not going to be able to get your membership forms. So what you mean? How you mean? So I basically, I was able to get the paper signature of it. But I was just like, I'd flagged to them that I had no, like I literally told them I did not have electricity. And like what I was going to be able to do that night was limited to what I was going to be able to do on my phone with data. And they put up this barrier like 12 hours later of, well, like you can't print, send, and sign and scan and send back, then you can't get the membership forms. And I was like, it's just so stupid, because it's like, you know that I'm going through this shit right now, and you're causing this situation. So I luckily, actually, when I woke up in the morning, the electricity had come back. So I actually was able to do it in, like, early in the morning, send it to them. And I did get my the membership list at 9:40 a.m. But by then, another candidate who had been approved had obviously gotten his membership list the night before. So he was able to send out his email blast at 9:02 a.m. And I had to wait until 9:40 a.m. to even get the membership list. So I had to kind of spring into action. I think I did get an email out to the members that day, like in the evening. Or maybe even the next day, I can't remember, but like I had to like kind of work at it, whereas he was kind of given the circumstances to be able to be ready to go. So that was a bit frustrating, because it's just like a stupidly small hurdle. But also, what happens is that these small hurdles, it's kind of like telling somebody in a wheelchair, well, it's just one step. Well, if you're in a wheelchair, like, and let's not even talk about the ableism that took place later, which I'm sure we will get to at some point. But these kinds of small steps, like sometimes a poor person just can't pay the fare, right? And sorry about that. The idea of like, well, just pay this if you're poor is not like a viable solution. Oh, well, just don't get in trouble with the cops if you're racialized, and not a viable solution. And in my case, like, I do have, because of my class circumstances and because of my income circumstances, I live in a low income neighborhood that has these kinds of barriers. And to be like, well, just overcome that by like having a printer. A, that assumes I can afford a printer. B, that assumes that I can afford a scanner on top of a printer, or that I could get a printer that has a scanner on top of it. And then C, that assumes that I have like reliable access to internet and electricity. And in my neighborhood, these three things, now I'm actually very, very lucky to be able to have access to those things, minus the electricity, which gets a bit wonky a couple times a year. And also like my internet's not great, but a lot of people don't have access to any of those things. And those are the people that we need to be encouraging to run for office. Those are the people that we need to see in positions of power to speak that truth to power, so that they can deliver for the millions of Canadians that actually don't have these things.
All right. So now you got through to the final process, of course. Now, there were some very unusual restrictions on who could be voting within this within this contested nomination. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, a lot. Well, one, generally you have an opportunity to sign up new members. That was revoked. That one actually we were already expecting, because according to the NDP constitution, new members have to be at least 14 or 30 days old from the day they sign up to participate in like voting functions of the NDP. So that was fair. They have actually removed that rule before. They removed it in Leah Gazan's run in Winnipeg Center, because she was signing up members over Andrew Swan, who was the establishment candidate, like 4-1. And at the 11th hour, they removed the limit of when you can sign up new members in order to let Andrew Swan actually make an effort to sign up a bunch of new people to kind of level out with the amount of members that Leah Gazan had signed up. So I know that rule actually can be removed. It's not like this constitutionally in place thing just to be in place, but no matter, that's fine. I expected that one. What I took a bigger issue with was traditionally lapsed members are usually just able to pay at the door. Oh, well, you know, I forgot to renew my membership. It's not like an automatic renewal, right? I forgot to renew my membership. And if they're a member in good standing who has like a history with the writing or whatever and can document like a history of a membership with the NDP, then you can just pay at the door and you're reinstated, right? And I actually had two supporters who were in that vein, who did live in Toronto Centre. One of them, whose partner was actually able to vote, but she had just, by coincidence, like she and her partner had actually signed up at the same time. Her partner was still an eligible voting member. For some reason she wasn't. So maybe she was telling me, like, maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, like maybe I signed up a little bit earlier, but I guess my membership lapsed and I never got around to doing it, but I want to do it to vote for you. So I had reached out to the NDP about this, and I said, oh, well, what's the process for lapsed members? Well, lapsed members never get a chance to vote at nominations. I'm like, this is just objectively not true. Like, that could be refuted like in so many ways, including by a staffer who actually told me later that they found that a very weird rule, like a new rule that didn't exist prior. And this is somebody who also worked for the NDP. So that, like, lapsed members, no new members, even if you weren't on that membership list, like on that, basically if you were not on that membership list on that day, you were not going to be able to vote. So that also includes like current members who may have moved to the riding and not updated their address, right? And I actually did meet one member like that, a friend of mine who had recently moved to Toronto Centre and was like, yeah, like I'm an NDP member. Like I was in Davenport before. I just want to switch over my thing, and wasn't able to do so. So that was like a whole nother thing that was like made the whole process like super unnecessary and complicated. And I felt that was just, yeah, I thought the whole thing was like unnecessary, right? Like alternatively, you could have just had a really great race between 4 candidates and open it up to the working class, you know? Garner the type of media attention that you need, bring new people into the coalition, get people excited about participating in the NDP. This is a poor riding, a poor racialized, like majority minority riding. And we had an opportunity to bring different kinds of folks than who usually engage with not only the NDP but politics in general into the coalition, and we squandered that opportunity by making this like a fucking membership club. And it also disadvantaged me because I'm not from the party establishment. I'm not like barely even a member of the party, right? So I just felt kind of like these exceptions and these rules were created mostly to just make this like an easy kind of smooth process for the establishment, but not for working class folks like me from the district who actually like live and breathe the effects of like 5 years of Bill Morneau, right?
Yeah, so the real sense, I mean, just speaking to you, is there seems to be a real like rampant problem of really ableism and classism at minimum. And it's obviously extremely concerning, quite frankly. Especially, I think it's worth highlighting again what you mentioned about the fact that homeless people within basically the area would need to bring a guarantor to basically be able to get involved in the party, which is it is insanely classist, and it's just shocking. But let's get back to what happened there. So now let's talk about October 2nd. the day of voting opens and the all candidates forum. So now this was some very, very bad event. Now, can you talk about this? Talk about what happens and just to the whatever degree you feel comfortable.
Yeah, the event happened, like the day itself was fine. I mean, it was just us reaching out to members, trying to like get out the vote and that kind of stuff. We had some great conversations with folks, and I think we did bring folks into the coalition, or not bring folks. Those folks were already part of the NDP coalition, given that they're members, but we brought folks over to our camp, right? Like our ideas, and that was pretty exciting. But there was this forum where candidates could kind of make their speech, and actually only a third of the membership who did vote had voted prior to this forum. This was like a really important opportunity for the candidates to present themselves and court what had turned out to be the remaining 2/3 of votes. I participated in this event, and I got there right at 7. At 7:12, I had received these like transphobic messages. Like this hair that I'm wearing right now is a wig. Like my hair's a bit shorter, but usually I'll wear a wig, especially if I'm trying to like look, presentable, because I just like to have my hair looking longer. But sometimes like I guess some people clock it. So I had this person messaging me up and was like, hey, like, show me your titties. And it was like, okay, weird. And then they were like, LOL, not so little. Take off your fucking hat, wig, And it was like, what the hell kind of like comments are these? And apparently it actually been messaging another person to a cis woman with like similarly misogynistic comments. Not to take off your hat comment, but like to show me your titties and stuff like that. So I had actually messaged like the NDP tech support number. Like there was a cell phone number that was given, like text this number if you're having any issues. And I was like, hey, can you kick this person off the call? No response. And at 7:19, finally this person had decided that they were going to post publicly. I don't know if they intended to post publicly, if it was a message directed at me and they had accidentally posted it publicly or what, like that we'll never know. But they were kicked out like 2 minutes after, 3 minutes after. The NDP took swift action there, but the person had actually messaged me back at 7:30, 15 minutes after I requested for this, previously like minutes behind because the situation has been resolved like 10 minutes ago. But what did frustrate me a bit was that there wasn't any outlet. This person didn't respond to me. So it had only been that they addressed the situation kind of when the person went public. So let's say this person had been Zoom bombing me and just sending me hate like all through the speeches, all through my speech, like the whole time, but it only ever done it in private, they would have never addressed it, right? Because I actually reached out to them and they didn't. It was only when I had, or this person had made a public announcement or public hatred, like, or misogynistic statement that they were removed. So I'm kind of annoyed with the party because it's like, I have thick skin. So this comment didn't necessarily bother me. And I will give the NDP credit that once they had been alerted that I actually did have a comment that was directed at me, they did actually like reach out to apologize. But like the day after, the deputy national director emailed and was like, oh, we took swift action like immediately after this comment was made. And I was like, no, you didn't. Like, you did not take swift action until the comment was made publicly. So don't obfuscate that with saying you took swift action immediately, because you did not, until the greater public perception made you have to take action. But this individual act of hate against me was something that I had to deal with basically on my own for almost 10 minutes.
All right. So now, obviously, on October 3rd, voting period that came to close around 8 a.m. Can you talk a little bit more about the period around that time and talk about change to the voting system?
Yeah, so the voting system is ranked ballot, which is what we have been told. And generally, ranked ballot is like pretty standard. So, like even in like contested NDP races traditionally, it is like there's a set of rounds, and then people are eliminated after each round. So, and that's usually using a ranked ballot system, or like a first past the post and then but like multiple rounds of it, but usually ranked ballot, especially now because it's just like a little bit easier and quicker. And it made sense that they were going to do that for an online nomination because it was the online equivalent of what they usually do, which is that like round one, oh, this person got the fewer votes, like they're out. Round two, this person, which is usually like in a whole like ceremony. So, but ranked ballot is like the easiest way to do it because you record everyone's results, and then you're just like the online software, which is simply voting, is able to do it. So that had happened, and it was changed without notice the day of voting to a point system. I'm not clear how these points were allocated. That hasn't been made public. We just received the amount, well, we received the times that everyone voted. So we saw how many people voted. And I think it was like 124 out of 235 members or something. See the times that people voted, and then a set of points were populated that were allocated to each person. So Brian Chang won the most points. He won 29% of points. And then the rest of us got our proportion. But that's not ranked ballot. What my guess is that they did a system in which if you're ranked number one, you get 4 points. If you rank number two, you get 3 points. If you rank number three, you get 2 points. If you rank number four, you get 1 point. And then points are allocated proportionally according to what your rankings were for each individual voter. But that wasn't what we were told. We were told that it was a ranked ballot with a vote system. So it was like one person, 4 votes, and then there would be rounds in which people would be eliminated and somebody would come out on swap, or whoever gets to 51%. So like it wouldn't necessarily have to be 3 full rounds, but it would have to be the exact number of rounds until somebody came out with 51% of the vote. And that just wasn't done, it seems. I don't know how those points were allocated. Like my theory is what I told you, but I actually cannot tell you how those points were allocated, and I don't really understand the math behind it, and the NDP will not disclose that. But even if you're just going based off the point system, like let's say they just use the words votes and points interchangeably for this context, right? Brian Chang only got 29% of the points. So why doesn't he have to go to 50% plus 1% of the points at the very least? Like he was able to pull ahead in this first round after the allocation of points. I don't understand why that was done. And that's not being made clear to us right now. And I don't think it will be revealed anytime soon.
So, speaking technically, the sense I'm getting, is there actually any way, unless information is revealed by the party, to verify the results of this election, of this nomination? No. So there's literally no way to verify this at all. So hypothetically, the results could basically not match the votes. like hypothetically, of course.
Well, yeah, if you have a scrutineer, the scrutineer is able to challenge it, but in an online format, like it's not the same because like I used to work for Elections Canada, and on voting day, scrutineers would come in, right? Um, and they were usually volunteers from each party, and I would have to hold up each individual vote, show, or usually I wouldn't have to hold up each individual vote, but like I would count the votes, and then if one was spoiled, I would actually like show it to them and be like, well, this is why it was spoiled. Let's say somebody like put the number 1, 2, 3, 4 on each like circle, or like drew an X through the entire fucking paper or whatever, then I'd have to actually show why, but there is an opportunity for the scrutineer to challenge that, right? Or even as I'm like skimming through the votes, there's an opportunity for a scrutineer to be like, actually, that doesn't look like a valid vote. So can you actually hold it up and then let folks deliberate? So that's common practice. That that happens already. But in the online format, like it makes, I don't know how a scrutineer would able to actually be a proper observer, you know, unless each vote was looked at like properly down to the wire each time. I don't see how a scrutineer could take part in that. So like I did have a scrutineer, but at that point it was mostly symbolic, right? Or it was to get information because they don't disclose like where people placed on the ballot. That's actually confidential. My scrutineer was asked to remain confidential, but I wanted to know at least, right? So I said, yeah, I was like, yeah, no, like let me know, please. And it's good because I wouldn't have known about that point system, right? Like another candidate who had just gone through a very like personally traumatic experience 2 days before. It was not to do with the campaign, it's just something that happened to them in their family life. They were not able to run the kind of campaign that they wanted to run, and their, I guess would be their traditional scrutineer was very held up by this personal incident, was also not able to attend and did not have the capacity to actually attend the scrutineer. He did not know about that point system. He just found out on Twitter that Brian Chang was announced as a candidate. We knew about the point system as it happened, but we wouldn't have known. We would have been kept completely in the dark if I didn't have a scrutineer there. So I would have just thought, oh, well, I lost. I guess I wonder I ranked on the ballot. Meanwhile, it wasn't even a ranked ballot system. There weren't rankings. There were point allocations.
Well then, the immediate thing when came to mind when I heard of this case and I heard of what had been happening really reminded me of the contested nomination, especially that featured Saron Gebrselassie. Now, you mentioned that you had a role on Saron Gebrselasie's team at that time. Can you talk a little bit about that and if there was any connections personally between this and the case back there?
I think yeah, I mean, I did. So I actually met, like, Saron's a very good friend of mine, and we had actually met through that campaign. At the time, I wasn't living in Parkdale, I was living in Davenport, but I used to work a lot in Parkdale. And I had heard about this situation. I was just trying to get politically involved, and I wanted to get more involved with the NDP. And somebody had put together a forum for the candidates, the nomination candidates to debate. These are 3 very high-profile candidates seeking the NDP nomination. So there was that forum to debate and discuss, and that person was, or claims to have been bullied by the party into canceling that debate. So this person was an NDP member, and from what I understand, like their membership was at risk if they proceeded forward with the debate. But I've always been politically independent. I signed up for the NDP briefly to attend a provincial council or something like that, like after the election. But I am like a politically independent person. I would say that I'm too left for any sitting party in Canada, except maybe like Quebec Solidaire. But at that time, I wasn't a member of any party or any political entity. I wasn't even really doing any full-fledged activism. So I said, oh, well, I'll hold this debate. I know a coffee shop where we can host it at. And lo and behold, we were able to do it. We didn't get a lot of pushback from the party. Paul Taylor, who ended up being the nominee, didn't show up to that debate. He had sent me an email basically that there was no reason to show up because he was going to win anyways. And I held the debate. That's where I got to meet Saran and whatever. And I said, oh, well, good luck to you tomorrow. It was like literally the day before the nomination. And I said, well, good luck to you tomorrow. I'll come through and I'll thing. So we went over there, and me and a friend, and like what it unfolded that night or that afternoon was a complete disaster, like a disaster of epic proportions. Like it was just full-fledged fucking like racism, ableism, like all the isms, just disenfranchising people from the political process. And from what I understand, a lot of the people who were disenfranchised from that process were mostly Saran's voters, but also did not actually participate in the general election or voted Liberal exclusively because of how they were treated in this process, which is very unfortunate. So on that note, I think that our circumstances were different in a lot of ways, but I think it shows the same problems with a pattern to desire power and control from a central apparatus rather than giving riding associations the power to self-determine their own what their local contexts are and how to respond to them at a partisan level. So in the context of Toronto Centre, like the RA did actually not have a place or a position in organizing this event, and that's unfortunate. Too bad that RA sucks anyways, so they probably wouldn't have done a good job either. But that was a thing that happened, like where control wasn't given to the RA, which whether I agree with the politics of the RA or not, I do think is a very important thing to note, because one thing I will say that the RA did do or did tell me when I spoke to members of it, that they were very concerned about exclusively online voting because these folks actually live here or lived here. Some of them do live here, some of them had recently moved, but they all had connections to the riding, and they knew that online voting would be a disaster for people in St. Jamestown and for working people in the riding. Sorry. So that was something that they did flag that wasn't respected by the party, and just ended up disenfranchising a lot of even this small base of existing members. It disenfranchised probably a couple of dozen from them in the process, two or three of who I know of. Brian Chang says that he spoke to about like a bit under a dozen people who had the same kind of problems, and Caleb had mentioned the same. And I haven't spoken to Waleed about that, but I'm sure he probably encountered some of those folks too. So in that context, like it was just such a missed opportunity that was created by Central, right? Like they actually manufactured those conditions. And because Central or political parties in general, because those are institutions of colonialism, right? So when a political party isn't willing to do the hard work of addressing and getting rid of or overcoming the issues that they have, ableism, classism, racism, colonialism, those kinds of issues, they all exist within the inherent party structure because that's an agent of white supremacy and colonialism. So you can remove some of that. I actually don't think that you can ever remove all of it, because like part, like my vision of like a post-colonial, post-white supremacist society does not have political parties or does not have parliaments and those kinds of institutions. But at the very least, you can do the hard work to address them by speaking to working people who live in the district and really tuning into their concerns. And Parkdale and St. Jamestown actually have very similar kind of overlapping issues, even though they are different neighborhoods in a lot of ways. And both of those neighborhoods are the places where the NDP should be smashing and like doing super well in. And those places are going liberal because they're disenfranchised by the political process of the NDP. And that's really unfortunate. And what it all boils down to is this, like, centralized big brother in Ottawa and disrespecting the local context, which is just going to be a losing strategy in the long term. So.
Yeah. So, with your experience and your experience with Sarah and Deborah Lassie's experience, do you think basically that NDP as a social democratic party is really like redeemable? Do you think it's actually going to be an effective vehicle for change in the long term, or do you think maybe there needs to be a focus on building new institutions?
I think it depends really on what people choose to do. Like, yesterday, like this coincidentally happened, this nomination and this result happened on the same day as the Green leadership race. So I actually lost twice, I guess, because I voted for Dimitri and I actually voted for Mariam Haddad and Dimitri was second on my ballot and Namita was third. So I I did see a loss. Like yesterday, a lot of people on the left had tried entryism into the Green Party to take it over and refashion it as a socialist vehicle. And I probably would have been one of those people who would have just cut my losses with the NDP and gone to the Greens. But that failed, as we know. Enemy Paul, who is a centrist. Coincidentally, she's actually to the left of the NDP in a lot of ways, but she's still a centrist, which is a whole nother conversation. But she won, and she doesn't seem very interested in creating a space for socialists to exist and thrive within the party. So either folks are going to go back to the NDP or they're going to be a voter without a party. And that is really, really fucking unfortunate because voting for a lot of folks is the most they can do. Like, I can skip voting. Like, I don't skip voting, but I don't care about voting beyond, like, I don't know, the stigma of like not being a voter and like the shit that you get from like your liberal parents about it. But I am not really big on voting because I'm a protest leader. Like I'm a change agent, and I use direct action to change just circumstances around me. So I'm already in these streets. But if you're somebody who is confined to your house, disabled, old, works multiple jobs, really you can't get involved in the protest movement. You can't get involved in social justice organizing. So all you really have is your morals and your vote, and then you try and align yourself with the party that best has your morals. And I think that in Canada, a lot of people do have left-wing morals. I would not like, I don't believe that most people fall on the political spectrum. I believe that that's an outdated way of looking at people, especially people who are not from the West, which in Toronto, 51% of folks are racialized immigrants. So mostly from the global South. So I don't think the left-right spectrum is an effective way to look at things. But when you're looking at it and you're like, okay, 59% of residents of Canada support defunding the police, and overwhelmingly, high amounts of Canadians want a guaranteed livable income so that people aren't left to languish on OW or ODSP when they can't work. More Canadians want to see pharmacare, dental care, want to expand Medicare. You know, Canadians want to see action taken on climate change. They're willing to dump, you know, $400 billion or whatever it's going to cost to finance CERB and the CRB for the next couple of years, so that folks can stay at home and know that they're going to get a check. The Canadians are already willing to do these things. So when a part, like the fact that now 3 political entities in Canada have tacked to the center, is really, really unfortunate for building class consciousness, right? Because in the Greens, the NDP, and the Liberals, you all have people who are mildly left or far left. Not a lot of far left people engage with the Liberals, so that is like the one exception, but you have people in the far left who are in the NDP and the Greens, and you have like social democrat progressives who engage with either those two parties or the Liberals as well. And everyone's just fighting to get like a better deal from the center, whereas there's so much open space on the left. And I don't know how people are going to respond to that. I think there needs to be some sort of political entity to shake things up, but I'm not convinced that it's going to be a political party that does it, because the NDP comes from a radical history. The Green Party comes from a radical history, and they look at where they are now, right? So I think it's also the system of the colonial parliaments that is causing this, and not necessarily the NDP itself as like this single entity. It's an entity within an existing structure, which is hateful and racist and classist. And so the party and the institution feed off of each other, right? And then form each other into worse beings. So it might be a political party. It might be like a Quebec Solidaire style, like rambunctious, loose coalition of activists who build kind of like a very unique model. But it might also be a new type of labor union or a workers' co-op, because there needs to be a lot of reform within the unions as well. It might be student movements and protest leaders. It might be alternative media institutions like the Canada Files. That might be where the left goes if political institutions refuse to respond to their growing calls for change. And the thing that I guess does give me hope about the NDP, and why after all these years of being burnt, whether through my work on Sarang Gebrselasie's campaign or my own campaign, or some of the fuckery that I've seen at provincial council, when you go in there to those councils, the generational divide is so stark. Like you could literally you could actually point out who's who and what they're gonna believe in based off like their age. Like it is literally that stark sometimes. And those bureaucrats, like they get old, you know? And like for better or for worse, them boomers are gonna die. So there might be an opportunity for young people to take over the NDP as those folks kind of retire out and sunset from the party. And that'll be a really, really interesting opportunity. And that'll be happening within our generation, you know? Like Andrea is obviously going to bomb in 2022, so she's going to be out. And that's an opportunity for the ONDP to really change, because now they have, you know, MPPs, more than ever before, MPPs supported by young activists, so like Joel Botila, Rima, those folks who are Jill Andrew of varying ages, but supported mostly by a coalition of younger radicals. And they now make up like a third of the OMDP's caucus. And then there's probably another third of people who are too scared to speak out against OMDP, but who are sympathetic to those ideas. And so when you have 2/3 quorum, or possibly over two-thirds, or possibly two-thirds quorum, but at least over 50% quorum, you can actually start shifting things, right? So 2022, I think, is going to be the marker of where the NDP is and where the NDP is going. And I think that'll have, like, so I guess I would still encourage some folks to stay engaged and see what the provincial NDP does, and that'll probably be an indicator for what the federal NDP chooses to do. But I don't know how much change is going to happen as long as the Anne McGraths of the world are around, because those folks are very problematic figures, and they're anemic to organizing and the needs of young people today, the needs to avert the climate crisis, the needs to address COVID-19, and the fact that young workers are dying of this disease, not only old people, and they're just not up to the task. So right now, the NDP is really running out of gas in this regards, and like, I now know more non-voters who are full-time activists than I actually know like voters who are activists, right? And if you're like even losing the ability to court activists as like a literal, what started as a literal protest party, then you're done, you know? So the NDP really, really needs to renew itself. I tried to do that. I was obviously blocked from doing it, and what I do believe is a rigged race. I've conceded. I'm not interested in fighting with them anymore about it, but I don't believe it was a fair race. And that's it. That'll be what's determined. But like, I don't know if I'm gonna run again, and I don't know if people who are around me who were interested in running are now going to run. And the people who are around me are racialized working class activists. So if you told that base to fuck with in a city like Toronto, I don't know how many more shots you got.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sebastian, for taking the time to speak with the Canada Files. Certainly hope that people will find this informative. And quite frankly, the fact that there hasn't been more media coverage on this, and for example, as you mentioned earlier, what happened with Saren Gebrselassie, I think really is indicative of really a weakness within left Canada and even the Canadian left media. So certainly, I'm hoping you'll get more coverage in terms of media and other things to make more people aware of this case. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to the Canada Files.
Okay, have a good one, Aidan.
All right, bye.
Ciao.
Okay. Oh, wait, great.